Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So this is a follow-up to my series of videos that I've done on this Umar Johnson situation. And I want to hear from y'all. I want to hear what y'all think about this. I look forward to you joining the live chat and providing your comments, and I want to respond to your comments live. But before I get into all of that, I just want to wish you all a happy new year. Peace and blessings to each and every one of you. I hope you're able to achieve all your resolutions if you do, in fact, do resolutions for the new year. Peace to Darian, Marion. Appreciate you providing your comment. Thank you for your compliment to the channel. I appreciate it. Peace to Doug. Shout out to you. Yeah, and I want to hear from you all. I may open this up so that everybody can join the live hangout, or at least, some people. I think I can get up to 8 people on the line discussion. I may try to open it up and just post a link. Hopefully there will be no problem with trolls. So I may do that after I provide these brief commentary. I wanted to know from you all, did you all have a chance to hear Boyce Watkins' response to Umar Johnson? If you can let me know in the live chat, I would appreciate it. Good afternoon to you, Douglas Jesse. Peace, S. Wiseman. Shout out to Master Shock Value. Peace to you. Did any of you all have a chance to see Boyce Watkins' response to Umar Johnson? You can just let me know in the live chat. You can put a 1 in the live chat if you heard Boyce Watkins' response. Oh, I see Kevin Smith is trying to diss Boyce Watkins. I see Wiseman listen to part 1. Master Shock Value said no, it was too long. And I see Kevin Smith is going in on Boyce Watkins. And yeah, Joan said something that I agree with. She said, he said, Boyce Watkins' video was almost 2 hours. He's way too long-winded. Yeah, I mean, he is, man. And that's one of my problems with it. Like, I was trying to listened to the whole thing. I forced myself to listen to the whole thing. He spent the first 40 minutes talking about random stuff that was completely irrelevant to the subject matter. It's like he spent a long time going off on some long tangent that had absolutely nothing to do with the subject matter. I mean, he titled his video, something about Umar Johnson and Tariq and all this and that. But then in the actual video, which was about 2 hours long, as somebody pointed out, he spent like the first 40 minutes just talking about random, irrelevant stuff. A complete waste of people's time. But I listened to it because I wanted to hear what this man had to say. Even though I have some ideological differences with him, I do have some level of respect for him. So I listened to it. Master Shock Value said he saw Tariq's video on Umar, and he has these laughing emojis with the tears rolling down the side of the face. Yeah, I feel you. I mean, that was funny, man. That was one of the, Tariq Nasheed should be a comedian, man, because he is hilarious. He had me dying laughing, man. He was tripping me out. And when I did my first video, my last video on this subject, I didn't see the entire Tariq Nasheed response, but I had a chance to see it afterwards. It was hilarious, man. It is a shame to see these prominent black figures go back and forth and exchange all these insults and stuff like that, but it was still entertaining. It was hilarious. He was talking about how Umar Johnson was basically threatening him, talking about like it's going to be some consequences and this and that. And then Tariq Nasheed was like, well, let's get the consequences popping. He just kept saying, and he's like, and one thing that Umar Johnson kept saying was that, keep my name out your mouth. And then throughout Tariq's video, he kept saying Umar Johnson's name, and then he kept saying, your name is all in my mouth, do something. So yeah, that was hilarious though. Yeah, so I agree with you, Master Shock Value. That was so funny, man. He had me dying, man. But even though it's like a shame that you see black men fighting like this, it was funny nonetheless, man. I can't front. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I have the links in the description box once this video uploads for those who haven't seen it. And Master Shock Value said, I see, he did see the part of, part of Boyce Watkins' video. It does start around 47 minutes. I mean, it's a shame that you got to listen to 40-something minutes of a video before he finally gets to the point, man. It's a complete waste of people's time. So if you do go watch the Boyce Watkins video, I have the link in the description box once this video uploads. Just skip to around the 40-minute mark so that way you can get to the meat of the video and the whole point of the video. Let's see. And Doug said he saw a 10-minute clip of Boyce Watkins. And yeah, that's probably the most, the video that he did was like 2 hours long, but the most relevant part of it is about 10 or 20 minutes long. So you don't have to watch the whole thing. It's a waste of your time, but he makes some valuable points. And I want to highlight those points in this live stream right now. S. Wiseman said, yeah, that was the roast of the century. Yeah, you're right. He really just went off. And, that's one of the points that Boyce Watkins talked about. He talked about how Tariq Nasheed essentially was trying to stay on code for the longest time. Like, there had been little disses back and forth or whatever before it erupted. And for the longest time, Tariq Nasheed was trying to stay on code, not bring his conflict with Umar Johnson out into the public and all that kind of stuff. So he held his tongue for a long period of time. And then I guess this was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and he just had to go off. And yeah, it was like the roast of the century, man. He was just going completely off. And he was like basically saying that he's not intimidated by all that rah-rah, tough Tony, fake goon talk and all that stuff. And he was like saying, well, bring it on, get those consequences popping. And, we can do this and all that kind of stuff. He was like, where I work and where I'm at and all that kind of stuff. And it's a shame to see, it is a shame to see grown men acting like that and talking like that, talking about fighting over a disagreement. That's unfortunate, man, because we know that we've seen situations where things like that have escalated out of control and people have gotten hurt or even killed. If you look at the example of the Nation of Islam with Malcolm X, how there was all this intense rhetoric. And this thing is nowhere near on that kind of level. But you have these people that were basically encouraging other people to take Malcolm X's life. And eventually the brother was assassinated by some fanatics and stuff. So this is very serious, man. And really, despite people's personal differences, despite their ideological differences, it should never get to the point where people are threatening each other. The ideas should be the things that are at the battle, not the actual people. It should be a battle of ideas. And as I said in the prior stream, this is not even like some kind of ideological thing. It's some personal thing, some petty thing. And you have Umar Johnson just blowing things all the way out of control. This thing wouldn't have escalated like this if Umar Johnson didn't come out with his ridiculous video on Instagram. But I want to go through some of the things that Boyce Watkins talked about in his response. Now, one thing that he talked about was this idea of groupthink, and you get that a lot here on YouTube. Now I think a lot of people are breaking away with it, breaking away from groupthink. But you have some people that like encourage groupthink. They encourage this idea that because somebody is speaking on Black issues, then you got to support them regardless of what they say or do. And Boyce Watkins basically said, when you behave like a sheep, like sheeps participate in groupthink. They all operate as a herd. You know, there's no individuality and stuff like that. And he basically said this. He said, when you behave like a sheep, you get what sheep get. Sheep get slaughtered. And this is what happened. Like when people blindly follow any leader, it ends up going the wrong way. I mean, if you look at Jim Jones, you know, the whole Jim Jones massacre and stuff like that, you know, that's like on the extreme end. And then on a less extreme end would be like people giving their money to a particular cause when it's really nothing but a hustle, when it's really nothing but a scam or a con. And either way, people are being duped. They're allowing someone else to control them. And that's what happens with groupthink. And you have people that participate in groupthink all the time. Like what they do is they try to tell you, well, you can't question him. You need to be quiet and stop talking about this brother and focus on all this other stuff. Focus on all these other issues. They want you to buy into some talk about a conspiracy and this and that against Umar Johnson. And you know, that's one point that that was brought up, like in Boyce Watkins' commentary or his response. He was talking about paranoia, how that's like a common thing on Umar Johnson's Facebook page, for instance, and even on his Instagram. It's like this idea that everybody is conspiring against him. You know, he's gone beyond just saying that it's some coons or some Negroes. He's now like lashing out at people who hold similar views to him, like a Tariq Nasheed or Boyce Watkins. He's going after everybody, even his own father, you know, saying that his father supports this stuff. And, you know, his father's facing threats, as I said in the prior stream. And it's just a crazy situation. So I think that that point that Boyce Watkins made about groupthink, I think that that's a great point. And then, you know, this issue about the definition of Black unity, I think that that's a powerful point as well, you know, that Boyce Watkins raises. But before I go into that, I want to just look at some more of these comments. Shout out to the True Royal family. Peace and blessings to you. Shout out to my sister. Shout out to Kicking Knowledge. And Kicking Knowledge said it seems like they all aim for social media views. And, you know, I think that that's true. I mean, anybody that's on social media is trying to get views to their channel, but I don't know if that's their sole purpose. And yeah, I don't know if that's their purpose or not. I just think that, you know, they were responding to Umar Johnson. Like after Umar Johnson, you know, went on this rampage and just like completely blasted them and all that kind of stuff, they really had no choice but to respond. And I have to give Boyce Watkins some credit. Like the way he responded was in a dignified manner, even though, you know, he used profanity every now and then, and that's fine for people who use profanity, but he still provided an intelligent type of response. He wasn't like joking around, and he wasn't being all uncouth and uncivilized like Umar Johnson. He provided a solid response that raised some very serious issues that I'm discussing in this video right here. So that's one thing that I did appreciate about Boyce Watkins' response once he finally got around to the actual point. And before I go into the Black unity, one thing that he said was that no one wins in this kind of situation where you have these people in this kind of public conflict that's not even about real issues, that's personal, where it's just like personal pettiness and stuff like that, where you have people going at each other. Nobody wins in that situation. And on this issue of Black unity, I think that this is a very important point. Like, what is the definition of Black unity? How do you all see Black unity being carried out in real terms? Now, one thing he pointed out was this. He talked about how people constantly talk about Black unity, for instance, in this situation of Umar Johnson versus the world, basically. You know, people are saying, well, you got to be about Black unity and this and that, but they don't say that when, for instance, when black people respond to quote unquote Republicans or coons and stuff like black coons and stuff like that, they don't say, well, you got to be about black unity. Don't go after that brother or sister that's a black person and this and that. You know, they're all for those types of exchanges where you're calling somebody a coon, a sellout, and this and that. Nobody has a problem with that. Nobody's talking about, well, you need to stay on code in that situation. But when you have these types of disagreements, like this situation involving Umar Johnson or whatever, people say, well, you got to be about black unity, even if you're like speaking out against bad conduct on the part of someone. You know, you're speaking out against corruption and this and that, or other types of wrongdoing, even something like molestation and all that kind of stuff, speaking out against that, or ill treatment of women. You speak out on that, all of a sudden it's like they want to shut down the conversation and make it about unity and stuff like that instead of dealing with the core issues. And that's one thing that Boyce Watkins talked about, like the definition of unity. Because in this situation, it's not like what a black community is fractured and all that kind of stuff. He was basically pointing out how you have a situation where it's everybody against Umar Johnson. I mean, you have Tariq Nasheed, Boyce Watkins, and you have all these other people raising serious questions about different issues, about licenses that Umar Johnson may or may not have, about the use of the funds that he raised and all that kind of stuff. So those are legitimate questions. And it's a whole bunch of people questioning that individual. It's not about a situation where the whole community is fractured and there's all this conflict and stuff like that. And Boyce Watkins raised some serious questions about this issue of being on code. But before I get into that, I'll just say this. You know, he pointed out how black unity doesn't mean that everybody has to think alike, or that everybody has to agree on every single point, or that there can be no kind of debate within the black community. He talked about how diversity is a means, you know, diversity of opinion or whatever is a means for the best ideas to emerge. So when people have different ideas and those ideas are tested against other ideas, the best ideas emerge. You have a clash of ideas, and instead of shutting down that dialogue, you need to encourage that dialogue. Instead of like censoring speech, there has to be more speech. And the best ideas will emerge in the marketplace of ideas. So unity doesn't mean that just because somebody is black, like Boyce Watkins was saying, that just because they're black, you have to be silent. You have to just allow them to do whatever, whether that's allowing them to pillage money from the black community for some fake school that's not going to ever be built. And that's one thing that Boyce Watkins, you know, well, I'll get to that in a second. But whether it's, you know, that situation where somebody is taking money from the black community or engaging in other foul behavior in the black community, you know, whether that means abusing women or something like that, or molesting children and stuff like that, you're not going to say, well, oh, or, you know, committing other crimes, you're not going to say, well, oh, because that person happens to have black skin or the same pigment as me, I can't speak on them, I can't address them. That's ridiculous. And Boyce Watkins drew the analogy to the police situation where you had this blue code of silence and all that kind of stuff. We don't want to replicate a situation like we see with the police, where the police ride or die with each other regardless of the circumstances. Like, for instance, whenever you had these police brutality cases, you see the police union rallying around the accused police officers. We don't need to have that kind of situation where we blindly rally behind and support people even when they are wrong. And you know it has to be a bad situation when everybody has something to say about this situation. I mean, you have Umar Johnson's own father, you know, speaking out in this situation, speaking out about how Umar Johnson's supporters are threatening him. You know, this brother is speaking out about just how Umar Johnson conducts himself, just about like how he talks down and two black people, and he's disrespectful, uses all kinds of foul language and stuff like that. I mean, the biggest example that comes to mind is this whole thing where he's going off on black people, saying, well, in 6 months, I've only raised like $250,000. And then he starts calling black people trifling and stuff like that. I mean, and then, this example of how he's going off on everybody that simply is expressing their opinions about this whole situation. And everybody, like, they're handling him with kid gloves. They try not to be disrespectful, but still he goes off and stuff like that. But the bottom line is this, man. A code shouldn't be a situation where we allow, that kind of stuff to happen. I mean, one thing that Boyce Watkins brought up was this whole thing about how even in the Catholic Church, for instance, they had a code and all this and that. And that type of code allowed a situation where you had young people being sexually abused by priests. And we don't need a situation where people are able to hide under a code and commit all kinds of crimes against the black community, swindle the black community, or, steal things from the money from the black community and stuff like that. So I think that that's a very valid point that he raised. Also, during his video, Boyce Watkins pointed out how there's a history behind this animosity with respect to Umar Johnson. He talked about how, just some experiences that he had with Umar Johnson, and I won't go into detail about them. I encourage you to just listen to Boyce Watkins' video, but he talks about like conflicts that Umar Johnson had at different venues. He talked about like Umar Johnson not really trying to get along with others, for lack of a better word. Like, and, he cites an example when, him and Tariq Nasheed and Umar Johnson were scheduled to do an event where they were all together. But Umar Johnson tried to stay away from Tariq Nasheed, and Boyce Watkins tried not to interact with them and all that kind of stuff. So he goes into that. And then, he goes into like how, people in Philly don't have much respect for Umar Johnson. Like, he has issues there and other issues around, in different places and stuff like that. And he basically said, well, if somebody is already breaking the code, for instance, by, taking money from the community or being disrespectful, insulting somebody, attacking somebody, doing other foul things, if they're already violating the code, what sense does it make for people to not respond and deal with that person? Because when you have this blind code situation, what you do is create an environment where corruption is allowed to flourish and there are no consequences for it. And, Boyce Watkins gave the example of like fungus growing in a dark, damp place. And when you shine light in that area, the fungus can't thrive and can't grow. Well, when people create this environment where, they have this quote unquote code, they are creating an environment that is ripe for that kind of fungus to grow. And it's a shame that like all these years later, like after raising all this money, there's still no school in sight. And that brings me to the main point that I wanted to bring forward in this discussion before I go to your comments. And that's this, Boyce Watkins said, well, there is no school that's going to be built. No school is going to be built. Umar Johnson does not really plan to build a school. And that's something Tariq Nasheed said as well. And I've said it before, like Tariq Nasheed pointed out how Umar Johnson was basically overselling it. And that made it clear to him that it was just a hustle and it was a scam and all that kind of stuff. And he drew the parallel between like a pimp, for instance, overselling a dream to a prostitute and stuff like that in order to keep her on board and stuff. So both of them basically said, well, there is no school. And I was listening to an interesting video done by this YouTuber, Madhead Doctor, and he was talking about how he thinks that Umar Johnson will still go forward and have a school, but it'll be much less than what he projected before, and that he thinks that basically Umar Johnson is going to scale back his vision of the school and pocket a lot of the money that he's raised instead of actually investing it into the school. But that's just one thought. But I think I'm along the lines of Tariq Nasheed and Boyce Watkins in terms of like, not at this point, I don't have any reason to believe that a school will be built. You know, I don't have any reason to believe that he's actually going to follow through with that vision. And it's just unfortunate. And it's sad. I mean, it's sad that you had a lot of people putting not only their money into that cause, but you had a lot of people voicing all this support behind the school and all that kind of stuff, investing their energy and their time into supporting this idea of a school. And it's a shame if it doesn't happen. And I really hope that Umar Johnson proves everybody wrong. That's something that I really hope for. That he proves everyone wrong and he builds this excellent academy and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen, especially now with this whole situation involving his license being questioned, you know, whether or not he had a license, whether or not he falsely held himself out to have a license. So that raises a lot of questions. And, you know, if there's some finding by this board that this man falsely held himself out to have a license, then that will make it harder for him to go forward with this school. And, you know, the way some people are talking, they're saying this is basically like the tip of the iceberg, and there may be more to this. There may be other charges down the line. And I was watching Anti-Afro Svengali, and she was talking about how it's possible that, you know, it may go to the school board issue as well about his certification to be a school psychologist. So there's much more to this situation. And it's unfortunate to see somebody go down like this. You know, if that's the case, like hopefully, you know, I still hold out hope that, you know, that things turn around for him and he's able to do some of these things he talks about and is able to rebuild his ties with people. Part of me still hopes for that, you know, despite my disagreements with Umar Johnson and, you know, the concerns that I've raised in these series of videos. But one thing that Boyce Watkins pointed out that was very sound and very great idea that he presented was the idea of supporting independent Black schools that are already established. I mean, there are schools, and I've cited this example before, like, for instance, in Washington, D.C., you have Ujama Shule, an African-centered school that talks about Black history, that teaches young people about their history and about their greatness and all that kind of stuff, prepares them, gives them knowledge of self and all that kind of stuff. Boyce Watkins talked about the need to support those kinds of schools, and he's trying to get together a list and all that kind of stuff, and he's going to make a donation to a school. I think he said like $5,000 to one of these schools. And he wants to get like information about the schools and all that kind of stuff. Schools that are actually in place, not ideas of schools and concepts of schools. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's an important thing to support schools that are already established. And also, I think that what we need to do is get more involved on the local level in our communities to hold the public schools accountable, make them provide the kind of education that our children deserve. The school systems in our communities, the public school systems, they are our school systems. Our money is invested in those schools. We pay local taxes, we pay state taxes, we pay federal taxes, and we have every right to demand that our children receive the best possible education. And that's something that we need to do. We need to go to these Board of Education meetings, go to your city council meetings, be engaged to ensure that our young people have the best possible education. And we need to take on our role in our household, you know, in terms of educating our children, because you're not going to get everything that you need necessarily in a public school. Your kids are not going to be taught everything that they need to be taught in life or about their history. And that's where we come in. We need to supplement our children's education as well. So yeah, man. So I support this initiative that Boyce Watkins is launching. I hope that he's sincere in this. I hope that it's not just to provide some kind of response to Umar Johnson. I hope he really does follow up with that. And I'm going to try to put together a list of some of these schools. I've posted the website. I don't think I. If I didn't, I'm going to post the website for Ujima Shule for those people who are interested in that school or they want to support that school so that you could have information about that school. I'll post a link to their website in the description box. And then also I'm going to try to put together a list as well of independent Black schools that we can support. But yeah, and before I go to your comments, there's one last thing that I want to mention, and that's this. Again, I really think that Boyce Watkins provided a dignified kinds of response to Umar Johnson. He didn't go on his level and go in the gutter and stuff like that with a lot of ridiculous name calling and stuff. So I appreciate it, and that's what I would expect from Boyce Watkins. I would expect him to respond in a dignified manner, because he is an educated man. He is somebody that has been on nationally syndicated media and stuff like that. So he knows how to conduct himself in a professional way. And I'm glad he didn't stoop to Umar Johnson's level. I mean, again, as I said before, man, it's like when you see somebody conduct themselves the way Umar Johnson conducted himself, um, it becomes clear that that's not the kind of person that you would really want to give money to set up a school to educate Black boys, man. But yeah, I appreciate the fact that Boyce Watkins responded the way he did. Some things he did not respond directly to Umar Johnson. Like Umar Johnson made some points during his live stream on Instagram, and it seems like Boyce Watkins just avoided like directly responding to some of the things that Umar Johnson said, like this whole thing about questioning his sexuality and his manhood and stuff like that, suggesting that he's obsessed or has some homosexual attraction towards Umar simply because he did commentary on Umar Johnson. Like he didn't even address that at all, and it seems like Boyce Watkins was more focused on the conflict between Tariq Nasheed and Umar Johnson. But yeah, overall, I was impressed with his thing. But one thing that I'll say again with Boyce Watkins, man, he really needs to be more focused with his videos, man, instead of like wasting people's time, just going on and on random subjects and stuff like that. And he's done it a lot of times. Like this is not the one time. I mean, he does that a lot frequently, unfortunately. But I'm going to go through your comments. I want to thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate it. And Annex said Boyce Watkins' commentary was biased based on his own past experience with Umar. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could say that. I mean, that's a good point. But Boyce Watkins also talked about how and it was like hearsay and stuff. I mean, this is not a court of law or anything like that. But he was talking about like all these other people contacting him, talking about Umar Johnson's attitude and raised questions about Umar Johnson. And, just about how he conducts himself, like how he deals with people in terms of him cursing people out and acting all belligerent and stuff like that. And, I just think that that's who Umar Johnson is, man. These videos are just exposing his true character. And one thing that I meant to mention, like, that I didn't mention in my last live stream on this subject was just like Tariq Nasheed suggesting that Umar Johnson is on some kind of drugs. He was like, are you on some kind of narcotic or something like that? And I don't know if that's the case, man, and I won't speculate on it, but the way Umar Johnson behaves and reacts, it kind of reminds me of Dave Chappelle's skits when he did that Rick James imitation. And he was basically talking about I'm Rick James, bitch, and all this and that. You know how that Rick James character just would be all on some egotistical stuff, and then he would be talking about like cocaine is a hell of a drug. That's the first thing that I thought about when I heard Tariq Nasheed basically suggesting that Umar Johnson may be on some kind of narcotic or something. I hope that that's not the case, and I don't have any evidence or any information about that. But I just thought that that was a funny point. I mean, Tariq Nasheed is definitely hilarious and stuff like that, and he's not some intellectual. So really, I wasn't surprised by his response. Basically, he said, "Well, you want to go on the gutter? You want to go low? Well, I'm going low with you. We can ride this thing out." And again, let's get those consequences popping and stuff. So yeah, he took it on his level and stuff, man. He used the same kind of foul language and got raw with them and went off on them and started clowning them and all that kind of stuff. But that's what I would expect. Doug said coke makes you sniff, and yeah, man, that's what he like. Tariq Nasheed kept talking about Umar Johnson sniffing during his videos, and I didn't really notice that too much. But that's the same thing they said about Donald Trump. Like people were saying, well, was Donald Trump high during that one debate he had with Hillary Clinton, where he was sniffing and all that kind of stuff. And that is like when people are on those kind of drugs like cocaine and stuff like that, it does give them a sense, like a inflated sense of self. They get all boost up with all this false confidence and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, I thought that that was amusing that he was raised. I mean, it's amusing, but yet sad if that's the case. I doubt it, man. I don't have any evidence to support that, but it was just something that came up in the discussion. Um, so let me go through y'all comments. Only Elisa said Boyce is a chatty patty, but I don't doubt that he's telling the truth about Dr. Johnson, about Umar Johnson. Yeah, he is like a chatty patty, man. That character, and I guess I'm being like kind of chatty by talking about this stuff, but I'm really talking about the issues. But with Boyce Watkins, like sometimes he reminds me of that character in Living Color, who's like, that lady who would always say, "Well, I'm not one to gossip," and then she would say all this stuff, start gossiping and stuff. That's kind of like how Boyce Watkins is. Like he was pulling out all this stuff, like all these conversations he had with all these people, and even like he was disclosing his conversations with Tariq, man. So I can see that, you making that point about him being a chatty patty. Darian said narcotics don't make you sniff. Well, cocaine is a narcotic and it does make people sniff, like when people, like if they're using cocaine. Um, so I'm going to keep going through your comments. Yeah, that's a good point, Doug, about tuition. Doug said this. He said, I always wondered if Umar Johnson did build a private boarding school, how much the tuition would be, and would the average black family be able to afford it? Would the average black family be able to afford it? That's a good point, man, because if you're going to raise like all the money that he wanted to raise, like I heard somebody say that he wanted to raise like $5 million or whatever, and have this boarding school where people actually stay there overnight. Like they stay at that school, they live at that school, away from their families and all that kind of stuff. A boarding school is expensive, man. We know that those private boarding schools are very expensive. The average black person cannot afford to take have their children attend a private boarding school. Many of the black people that attend those private elite boarding schools, many of them have to rely on scholarships for their children to attend. So yeah, I mean, that's a very practical question. And if it's only going to benefit an elite group of black people who can afford to go to that school, how does that collectively benefit the community? All right, so bear with me a second, Joe. 1 second. I'm just going back through the comments. Um, Master Shock Value said Umar is always trying to pick a fight. I don't know if he's always trying to pick a fight. I just think that he overreacts, man. Because, like, he'll hear something and, just overreact to it. Like, he heard, like, last year, he heard that guy Seti's comments about Umar Johnson. And I guess in a way, you could say that he kind of like started that because he was the one saying, well, y'all need to come to a tribunal with the elders and blah, blah, blah. And then while saying that, he was boasting about himself and talking about how he outshines everybody and this and that. And you need to come to this tribunal and my name rings out and all this stuff more than anybody's name and blah, blah, blah. And that did kind of like get it going. Like that's what got the feud going. But then when Seti responded the way he did, like Umar just went off. Like, Umar doesn't have, it seems like he doesn't have much self-discipline. You know what I'm saying? Like an ability to be above the fray and like be disciplined to the point where he doesn't feel the need to react and respond to every little thing. And it's like his followers or the people who give him information, it seems like their whole mission is to just keep him going, like to keep him agitated and keep him in these types of conflicts, man. Because he talked about like how they're giving him information, sending him this person's video and that person's video. Yeah, so my sister said they need to stop acting like catty women. And Darian says that Tariq Nasheed is the true flim flam man. He knew all along. He even alluded to that. Yeah, I mean that's a valid point. Like, if he knew all along, like why would he keep putting Umar Johnson in his films and all that kind of stuff, basically co-signing him? But Tariq Nasheed does apologize for that. Like he apologized for raising the profile of Umar Johnson and this and that. But that is a valid issue to raise. And I see that Nagon11 said no one has won this at all. And how does this make us all look? That's a good point. Like nobody, I mean, at the end of, I would say, I mean, I hear your point, but I think that in terms of like, I think that Umar lost. He is the one losing here because he's getting a lot of negative attention. And, that's not a helpful thing. It's not a helpful thing when you have people, for instance, that support Boyce Watkins and Tariq Nasheed pulling away from Umar Johnson. Because, both of those men have large followings, and a lot of those men, a lot of those followers supported Umar Johnson, and now they're pulling away from him. So in that sense, I think Umar Johnson is the biggest loser. But at the end of the day, nobody wins, as you said, and the black community certainly doesn't win. To have this kind of spectacle going on, and they don't win like when you have a situation where somebody has presented themselves falsely, if that's the case, and has received all this money but hasn't built anything. Yeah, so Kevin Smith said that I can say that Tariq has stolen from me. If you can let us know how did he steal from you? I mean, I think you mentioned that in the last live stream as well, and maybe you put it in one of your videos. I got to check out your videos, but if you can tell us just in the chat room. Okay, I see that Master Shock Value said not to get off topic, but Sheriff David Clark is getting investigated. I heard about that. I know he was investigated for something that happened at a prison or something like that. And I know that True Royal Family follows a lot of the information on him. She's done a series of videos on her channel about David Clark, and I encourage y'all to check her channel out. Subscribe to her channel as well. Darian said nobody's calling Tariq Nasheed out. I mean, people have been calling him out for years, man. I mean, on a whole bunch of different issues. But, you know, not right now. I mean, he's not the focus right now. And, you know, I think that by bringing him up, it's like people are trying to deflect away from Umar Johnson and his situation. And that's one of the points that Tariq Nasheed raised. Like he said that basically by creating this conflict, it's like it diverts attention away from this hearing that Umar Johnson has and this issue of the money and all that kind of stuff. Omniscient said Umar for president. I mean, I mean, I've made my view clear on Umar, but yeah, I mean, if you could have an authoritarian figure like Donald Trump as president, I guess I could understand why somebody would say Umar for president. And then somebody said a joke about Umar Johnson's. I won't go into it, but I will say this: like that's one thing, you know, that Tariq Nasheed brought up in his video. He was talking about like some. Well, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't want to go there. I don't have any information about that, so I won't raise that in this video. And True Royal said it seems like Boyce Watkins can't do no wrong. True Royal also said Umar's father is worried about white women. And I know that he has some disagreement with his father, like he disagrees with Umar Johnson on the issue of interracial relationships and all that kind of stuff. But I think that the main trouble that I have with what's going on with him and his son is that Umar Johnson put it out there that his father was collaborating with his enemies basically to get his license taken or to have this hearing proceed and stuff like that. And because of that, like these people are threatening his father, man. You know, they're threatening to do him harm and stuff. And I think that that's troubling, man. It's troubling that you have those kind of followers, you know, those kind of people that will go all out for you like that, you know, threaten to take your father's life, and yet they claim to follow you and stuff. I mean, it seems like the sensible thing for Umar Johnson to do would be to tell his followers to stop threatening his father and tell them not to threaten anybody. You know, we could talk about different disagreements about somebody being in interracial relationships and all that, but we have to, you know, I think that the issue of threats and intimidations needs to be dealt with as well. I mean, that's the issue. I mean, it's just not appropriate for somebody to be encouraging or creating an environment where that kind of activity goes on. Umar Johnson could stop those kind of threats from happening by telling his people don't make any threats and all that kind of stuff. And Darian said, and Umar, he said Boyce Watkins should be called to court as well. He sold his company to, you know, this white-owned company, and that's not a reason for him to be called to court. I mean, if that's a legal transaction, then you know he has every right to do that, whether or not we agree with it or not. That's a whole separate question, but you know, I don't think that's a basis for him to be drawn to court. I mean, it's a reason for people to criticize him and scrutinize him, as you know, Yvette Carnell did when she did her videos to him and all that kind of stuff, raising questions about that transaction. Oh, True Royal said that Boyce Watkins scammed her friend out of $600. How did he do that? How did he scam your friend? Let me know about that in the chat room. Emo Jones said that Boyce is good at education, but he could leave the social commentary alone. I think that there's some truth to that. Like, for instance, like in the realm of politics, I don't think that that's his best suit. I don't think that's a strong area for him. Some social commentary, like anybody can make commentary about anything, like these social issues, relationship issues, etc., and stuff like that. But I do think that his best area is like these financial issues and economics and stuff like that. Um, I think that obviously that's his strong area since he has a PhD in finance and stuff. And X asked, "What is the code?" And I don't know all the details about the code, but from what I understand, it's something that Tariq Nasheed regularly talks about. This idea that Black people shouldn't be attacking each other in public and all that kind of stuff, and they should deal with their affairs, behind the scenes or whatever, and not air themselves out and be divided in public and stuff like that, and just have a code of discipline. Also, I think the code deals with like having consequences for people who betray the Black community. For instance, these sellouts and stuff like that. They should be held accountable and stuff. But I'm sure somebody you know in the chat room is watching could provide more detail to the code. But that's the basic gist of it, from what I understand. And Herb Saint said that he doesn't respect any of them. None of them are unified for the upliftment of African Americans. And True Royal said all three of them are full of it. Yeah, to some degree they are. To some degree they are. But I mean, I recognize that they have their strengths and their weaknesses and all that kind of stuff. But to a degree, all of them can be criticized for different shortcomings or whatever. Um, but I don't think any of them are on the level of Umar. Any of those three, at least, are on Umar's level right now in terms of the scrutiny that's warranted. And Doug said to save face, he has no choice but to build a school or deal with the GoFundMe for fraud and all that kind of stuff. And Umar Jones said that Umar's school is like Tommy Sotomayor's movie. Yeah, because like when I first got on YouTube, like that was something that Tommy Sotomayor was talking about, like raising funds for this movie. And then here we are, like I think it's like 3 years later, going on 4 years later, and there's no movie. And he actually, if I'm not mistaken, acknowledged that there will be no movie, but yet he still has all these gullible followers and supporters. Yeah, that's a good point, S. Wiseman. I mean, like the main thing that we see from Tariq are his documentaries. Um, And Annex said that people confuse having an opinion as bashing. And S. Wiseman said it doesn't cost much to start a parent, home-based school or to run one. Okay. Let me see if I missed anything before I go. Hold on 1 second, Joel. Annex said that the only one who stayed cool was Boyce, but he couldn't avoid getting petty. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and Orlando Greenhill said, I never heard Tariq bash him until now. Tariq took up for him a few times when people were talking crap about Umar. Yeah, that's true. Really true. Because even that video he did before this whole blow up, that wasn't an attack on Umar. He was just saying like he's not taking a position, and he was speaking in terms of hypotheticals. He wasn't being disrespectful, and I haven't heard him say anything disrespectful about Umar. Yeah, that's a good point. Somebody said leaders don't call each other faggots, bitches, and want to fight. Generally, they will go under the table and ruin you. And Jones said, Umar is a good speaker, but I doubt that he would be a good school administrator. I mean, just imagine, like, you see how he goes off in these videos. I mean, just imagine him running something, actually running something where he's in control. I wonder if he goes off on it, would go off on his employees or, those who work under him in the same fashion that he goes off on these people he doesn't even know like that. Yeah, I agree. Only Alyssa on politics. Boyce Watkins definitely needs to keep his mouth shut. Yeah, I liked it better when he had all these people commenting for him. Like he had different people, like when Yvette Carnell was on his channel, providing political commentary. He had that guy Benjamin Dixon on his channel at one point. It was a lot of diverse programming on his channel, so he had these people that specialized in all these different areas. And now Boyce Watkins just talks on everything. And I don't think he's best suited to talk on these different subjects. Um, Somebody said they bought Tariq's Art of Macking book. It was a good book. I just read excerpts from those books, and from from what I could tell, I mean, there was a lot of deception of women and, deceiving women and playing games with women and, a lot of misogyny in those books and stuff. One day I'm going to take time aside and do a book review of Mac and one of the Mac lessons, or at least one of them, just for curiosity's sake. Doug said he saw a rough draft of Fatherless America last year, and he said it still needed more editing. Um, yeah, so I can't speak on that until I see it, but I know it's been a long time. He's talked about raising this money, and there has been no film and this and that. And as Wiseman said, it appears that our men are posturing for position to lead the black nation. I don't trust men who engage in such antics against each other. Yeah, that's a valid point. I can't argue with that. And Isaiah Smith said, I'm getting pretty tired of Boyce Watkins' 40-minute videos where he doesn't even get to the title subject until 30 minutes in. Yeah, I feel you. I feel you, man. It's been a while since I've watched. I mean, and other than this recent video that I just saw where he's addressing this Umar situation, I haven't been watching his videos that often lately, but I'm still subscribed to him. Yeah, he often does that. Like he had these long videos where he spends most of it just talking about stuff that is completely irrelevant, man. Shout out to B Money. B Money said Boyce Watkins' financial information isn't so good based off of what he's selling it for. He said that most of the information can be gotten in various financial books for a few dollars. And that was one of the points that Umar Johnson made about Boyce Watkins. He said a lot of this information that he provides is publicly available, like on Wall Street Journal and other places. Um, and he basically said, well, how can you talk about financing when finances and all this and that when you haven't built any financial things? Um, but you can say, well, Boyce Watkins does have a school where he's teaching people and this and that. And Boyce Watkins does have businesses like he mentioned in his video and stuff. Okay. Well, yeah, I want to thank y'all for tuning in. I wish each and every one of you a happy new year, peace and blessings. Thank you for watching.